I'd like to call the City Council meeting for May 7th, 2019 to order. Could I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Bringold.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
Gesme.
Here.
Lundell.
Here.
Mattson.
Here.
Montgomery.
Here.
And Mayor Altoff.
Here. Would you join for the stand up for Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, could we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Bill and second by Morris to approve the agenda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. That leads us to public hearings. The first public hearing tonight is Resolution 2421, certifying unpaid utility charges to be collected with taxes. Linnell, could you take that?
Thank you, Mayor. On a quarterly basis, the city sends out notices to property owners and customers of delinquent utility accounts. And they are notified of the public hearing that is being held this evening. And this is the opportunity for them to speak to the city council regarding their unpaid bill. Once it's approved, then it is certified to the property taxes as an assessment. They do have the opportunity to pay it before we actually certify it if they would like. So now we have the public hearing.
Okay. Let's open the public hearing for Resolution 2421. Is there anybody that would address the resolution certifying unpaid utility charges to be collected with taxes? Second call. Final call for Resolution 2421. Certifying unpaid utility charges. Not hearing any response. I take a motion to approve Resolution 2421.
You have to close the public hearing.
I can close the public hearing first, sorry. Close the public hearing, and I take a motion to approve Resolution 2421.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Mary Jill, second by Bill to approve Resolution 2421. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. That brings us to Resolution 2422, vacating a plotted street and alleyway in the city of Cannon Falls. Dave, could you tell us about that?
Thank you. Public hearing tonight based on a request from the property owners, for the property owners adjacent to Park Street West, west of 8th Street South, have jointly petitioned to vacate the alley on the south side of the four lots as identified in the exhibit that Sam prepared. In addition to that, the Wilds have requested the vacation of an 80-foot right-of-way for Colville Street south of property that they own. And I learned tonight that there's also been a request possibly for the vacation of Bell Street, which is on the south side of the river, not included as part of this application. So we'll catch up with that at a future public hearing. But tonight, the public hearing pertains to the request by the four property owners adjacent to the alley to vacate that 16-foot alley, and then by the Wilds to also vacate the 80-foot right-of-way for Colville Street. I would like to just mention to the council that I've talked to the Wilds tonight about recommending to the council that if you're going to go ahead with the resolution to vacate the alley, I would like to exclude from the vacation resolution the portion for Colville Street. I'd like to double check the legal description. Also, I'd like to visit with the Wilds about the potential of us retaining an easement across the vacated portion of Colville in the event that it does become vacated, and they've agreed to do that. So, again, the hearing tonight is based on, the public hearing is based on the alley itself and Colville Street, but if you are going to go ahead, I would like the opportunity to delay the potential vacation of Colville Street.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing for Resolution 2422. Anybody who would like to address the public hearing? Second call, public hearing on Resolution 2422. Final call, Resolution 2422, vacating the platted street and alleyway in the city of Cannon Falls. Not hearing anybody, not hearing any response. Let's close the public hearing. And I accept a motion to approve the Resolution 2422 with the exception of Colville Street.
Correct.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bill and second by Matt to approve the vacation with the exception of Colville Street.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to abstain because I'm an affected property owner.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5 to 0. One abstention. That brings us to presentations. Tonight we have Brad here from the accounting firm Abdi, Ike and Myers. Maybe, you want to introduce Linnell?
Sure. Mayor and council, this is Brad Faltasek and his associate Kendra Perpich. Is that correct? From the accounting firm of Abdo, Ike and Myers. That is the firm that we have used for a number of years now. And he's here tonight to present the audit for 2018.
Welcome, Brad.
Honorable Mayor, council members, you have in front of you three documents. One is the audit report itself, which has the blue cover on it. Another one is our management communication, which is just required communication that we are required to give to you, and you can read through it procedure. And then the last one is the presentation that I'll go through tonight. So the presentation is really just a summary of what's in the audited financial statements themselves. But what you're actually paying for is that what's in that harder cover blue document that has our opinion in it. So this presentation is just a summary of what's in there. So open the first page of that, which have the auditor's opinion and Minnesota legal compliance. So as part of our audit, we designed our test. So we're out here. Thank you. So we were out here in mid-March, went through our audit. We were out here 3 days, I believe. So went through that process, worked with Linnell. Her staff did they do a nice job putting everything together for us. So I'd just like to thank her and the cooperation that we've had in that process. But so we'll design our tests and procedures to give ourselves a level of comfort that everything in the financial statements as presented is materially accurate and presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So we went through those processes. We're issuing an unmodified or a clean opinion on your financial statements. So that's the opinion you're looking for when you have a report done. So we believe everything in there is materially stated accurately and presented accordingly. One other piece we do is in the Minnesota legal compliance. So the state auditor requires us to go through a series of checklists as part of our process. So they want us to check different statutes that you make sure you're following these statutes throughout the year. So we'll do a sample test related to those things. So those things may be things as like make sure your investments are appropriate in accordance with statute, because they say you can't invest in risky investments. So we just make sure you're investing in the appropriate investments, making sure if you're issuing debt, that you're issuing those in accordance with statutes, and contract and bidding, make sure you're following those statutes. So a number of different things we go through, and we're not reporting any non-compliance with any of those things we went through this year as well. So good results in both reports. Page 3, again, going through our audit procedures, if there's any area that we find is higher risk with internal controls or anything, that we would bring those to your attention in this report. The one finding we have this year, and this is a finding we have in many, probably 85% of the cities that we audit. This is a report on preparation of the financial statements. Our audit is our job as auditors is to come in and audit the financial statements, and it's management's job to prepare the financial statements. We, however, do prepare the financial statements as part of that process. So this is really a control finding, just outlining whose responsibility it is, and this is management's responsibility to put that book together and it's our job to audit that. So the internal control finding comes that we're the person that's giving us the information and we're compiling all that information is the same person that's reviewing all the information and saying everything's in there. So that's where the internal control piece comes in. So it's just an area that kind of defining that responsibility. And so there's nothing to be concerned with there, but just something we have to put in there. So we'll get into the results here on page 4. So specifically with the general fund, the city has a general fund balance policy to have in reserve at year end 40 to 50% of the following year's budgeted expenditures for that fund. So if you look on this chart on page 4, you'll see that's the gray area where that ranges, that 40 to 50%. You've finished each of the years presented since 2014, and that's in that 60%. Mid 60% range. And then we have the budget number at the top there. So you're staying above your minimum fund balance policy. So you're managing your general fund well over the years. Page 5, this gives the 2018 results for the general fund. Take a look at your budget numbers compared to your actuals. So the first line there, your revenues, you received about $157,000 more than what you had budgeted during the year. A lot of that came in license and permits, had some building activity. I know many cities are budgeting those line items conservatively for the last number of years. And then the taxes and property taxes came in about $30,000 over what you had budgeted. Expenditures overall about $207,000 over what you had budgeted, and that was really a result of the capital outlay. You purchased some property as well as repaid the EDA fund for some of the properties they had purchased in the past too. So those were both unbudgeted amounts. Then looking at page 6 and 7, we take a look at where your revenue sources are coming from in your general fund. Page 6 is your revenues. You can see that those first bars, and this is over the last 3 years. About 63% of all your revenues in the general fund come from property taxes. That, and if you add in the local government aid that comes from the state, you're about 82%. And many cities of your size are in that 80% range for taking a look at putting both of those two items together. There's some cities out there that don't get any LGA, and then they just make that up with the tax levy dollars. So they're still right in that 85% range for those amounts put together. So nothing unusual there as far as how you're funding your general operations. Page 7, your expenditures. This is where you're spending your money within your general fund. So public safety is the majority, or spending the majority of it there. So that's the police and fire inspections, followed by general government and public works after that. Again, nothing really unusual there. When you have a police and full police department, you're going to see that higher amount. Page 8, your capital project funds. So these are the funds you're set aside for different either construction projects in town or monies you're setting aside for equipment purchases in the future. So you have, it's kind of where they're sitting some restricted dollars. You can see that jumped up this year. So you did have some monies in capital project funds that were restricted for a specific project. Other funds are just, you've been putting in there to save up for future years. But the restricted increase this year was related to the bond you had issued in 2018 and hadn't been spent yet. But since you issued that for a specific project, it has to be spent on that project. So it's restricted until that project is complete. Special revenue funds. Special revenue funds you have 3 of those: your library fund, your cable fund, and your fire department operations fund. So these are funds where you have a restricted revenue source or committed revenue source. So the committed revenue source would be something that council has by resolution said, this money that comes in has to be spent on a specific purpose. A restricted revenue source would be one where a third party, not within the city, would be saying, you're collecting this money and it has to be spent on a specific purpose. So that's where these funds come into play. You can see that you do have some restricted fund balances there, about $120,000 of restricted balances and $160,000 of assigned fund balance. Your debt service funds on page 10. We have each of the funds presented at the top with their cash balances and total asset balances and the total bonds outstanding. This page here does not include any bonds that are associated with your enterprise funds, so your water disposal funds. These would be bonds for your typically your building or street projects associated with those. At the bottom there, then, we have the next 10 years of debt service requirements for the bonds that are presented above. So this doesn't mean your bonds don't end in 2028, but we just present a 10-year schedule here. So you can see in the next 5 years, from 19 to 23, or 5 years, you have about $800,000 debt service requirements, and after that, it drops down to about $600,000, strictly debt service. So this takes out any kind of new bonds you may issue after at the end of 2018. Page 11, your water fund. The top chart there shows your operating cash receipts compared to your operating cash disbursements plus your debt service requirements for the year. So what we're comparing there is, are your operating receipts meeting your operating disbursements plus your debt service? So are you generating enough revenue or receipts to support those two operations? You can see in each of these years presented, back in 15 and 16, you were slightly under, but in the last 2 years, 17 and 18, you have been generating enough receipts to pay both of those. The bottom chart then takes a look at your cash balances for the last 4 years. So you can see that's steadily been increasing. The red line there shows that the minimum amount that we wouldn't want to see that cash balance go below for your operating activities. So anything above that red line is really reserves for capital type activities. So I'm not saying that it's an excessive dollar amount at all. It's just amounts reserved for more like capital type things. Then with the sewer fund, you can see that same chart at the top. If the receipts are meeting the disbursements and debt service requirements, you can see the debt service requirements in the disposal fund are quite a bit more than or as a percentage here, quite a bit more than what they were in the water fund. They make up about $800,000, I believe, of the requirements of disbursements in this disposal fund each year. Then the bottom chart, the cash chart, you can see that has increased from 2017 by about $187,000, but still significantly below that target line where we would want to see that above. And that really is made up of that debt service requirement, that $800,000. It's tough to have that in reserves plus your operating expenses. So, but that'd be what we'd recommend have that cash balance at. Your ambulance fund on page 13, receipts have been meeting the disbursements. You don't have any debt outstanding in the ambulance fund. You can see in the cash balances there dropped about $200,000 from the previous year, and that's, as you know, the purchase of the ambulance last year caused that decrease in the cash. But you had been building it up for that purpose. Stormwater fund on page 14. Stormwater fund, the receipts are definitely meeting the disbursements and the debt activity here. You have a cash balance at year end that's been rising since 15. You have just about a $500,000 cash balance at year end, and the target is significantly below that. However, you don't have a lot of operating disbursements in this fund during the year, but if there is any major repairs or anything related to the storm sewer fund, that'll eat away that cash reserve pretty quickly. So that's definitely not an excess cash reserve either. We have a deputy registrar on page 15. You can see since 2016, 17, and 18, the receipts have not been meeting the disbursements in that top chart. You can see the result of that in the bottom chart, where you have the cash went into a deficit in 2016, and each of the subsequent years has gone slightly more into a deficit, ending just over $21,000 in a cash deficit at year end. Recycling fund, this is our last enterprise fund that we'll talk about, or that you have. And you can see the recycling fund has been meeting the disbursements with the receipts, and the cash balance has steadily been increasing. So you have a ending cash balance in this fund about $132,000 at year end. Then I'll just talk about cash. On page 17, we compiled all your cash for the city into these three bars for the last 3 years. And you can see since 16, it says increased a little bit in 17 and then a jump in 2018. Some of that jump in 18 related to the unspent bond proceeds that are still in there that will be spent down in 2019 now. Was a lot of that increase. Then the last few slides here, we'll talk about how you compare with other cities. So for council members who have been on in the past, we've compared your city and these key ratios with other cities across the state of Minnesota. We still have that comparison in here. We were displaying it a little different, but we also added other cities in Goodhue County within that class 4 group, which would be populations of 0 to 10,000 in population that are not reporting on a cash basis. Because some cities do report on a cash basis if they're small. Or there's certain criteria you can, but you don't fit in that category. So the first slide, we have take a look at tax rates and taxes per capita. You can see on the top chart there, you're the blue line. So the comparisons with other cities across the state of Minnesota, you come pretty close to where other cities of comparable size are. And then within the county, you're slightly lower. You're at that 64%, and others within the county on average are at that almost 77%. Same story down below with the taxes per capita. You're about the same with other cities in Minnesota. So tax rate and tax per capita about where on average where other cities in Minnesota are. Page 19, debt per capita. So here you're what would look like significantly above the others, but this would tell me since your taxes aren't higher than the peers, that a lot of your bonds are being paid back with special assessments and other user type. If it's affecting that property owner, they're paying for those bonds. So it's kind of what the story of that top chart tells me. In the bottom chart, debt service expenditures as a percentage of total expenditures, you can see it dropped in 2018, and that was really because you had a large project. So your total expenditures increased, so the amount of debt service you're paying against that percentage decreased. Page 20, current expenditures per capita. Again, comparing against those two peer groups that we have out there. These are just be current expenditures, so anything that's non-capital related or non-debt service related. You can see you're slightly above the peers in both of those all the years presented there. Then the capital expenditures below, that's going to fluctuate from year to year. You can see the peers are hovering around that $400 per year, where each individual city is going to go up and down depending on the number of projects they have going on, but that's what it shows for the last 4 years. The last chart on expenditures here, this shows by department where you're spending your money. So general government, public safety, public works, you're the blue bars compared to your peers there. So slightly higher in a few of those categories, but that's kind of gives you a comparison for where you're spending your money. You're spending public safety, you have probably the biggest variance there. Capital outlay is going to change again from year to year based on what you have going on, but the last ratios, or the last slide, we have a water debt service coverage ratio and your sewer debt service coverage ratio. So again, similar to what we talked about on those other charts with the water and sewer, that are your operating receipts and net operating receipts generating enough revenue to support your debt service requirements. So we'd want to see your blue line right around that 100% or above, and in both sewer and water, you are at that right around that 100%. So nothing to be alarmed at with those either. So any questions on any of that? I will go into I want to open up the financial statements real briefly, just because there are some new council members on, so I want to explain a little bit what's in here so it's not completely foreign when you're taking a look at it. If you open to page 13, and I'm not sure how much background you have in government finance. Typically, people don't have a ton, but 15 or page 13, this is the independent auditors report. So this is the report you're looking for. It gives our opinion and says that we're issuing an unmodified opinion. On page 17, this is the management discussion and analysis, and this is a statement or a narrative about what happened during the year in the city. So if there was a resident wanting to know what happened during the year, this is the document I'd point them to. This gives a summary of what happened, kind of the different activities that happened during the year. It's just a summary of, and it also looks into the future too on page 27. What was council thinking about when they prepared their 2019 budget? Then on page 31, government financial statements have two sets of statements. One, the government-wide financial statements, which are on page 31 through 33. So these are the balance sheets and the income statement, as we could say, for the government as a whole. So we're looking at the balance sheet. We call it the statement of net position. We have the government activities and the business type activities. So the business type activities would be your enterprise funds, your water, sewer, ambulance, all those activities are all combined into that one column. Those government activities is everything else. So those would be your general fund, your debt service funds, special revenue capital project fund. They're all combined in this column here. Now, when we're looking at, when you're throughout the year, you're looking at your financial activity, there's not assets or long-term assets or long-term liability recorded in the different funds you're seeing. Here we add in all your streets and all your capital outlay, all your bonds. So these front two statements are more set up as on the full accrual basis that you would see a typical business or something like that. The statements after this, we call the government-wide statements, are the fund financials. So this is the activity you typically see throughout the year when you're looking at financial activity. If you purchase a car, you'll see that as an expenditure in here. If you purchased a car on the full accrual, they would show up as a capital asset. It's kind of, if you can kind of wrap your head around that. If you want to turn back, that's probably, if you have any questions on that, I think that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering on, like on 31,
Yep.
the right-hand column, the EDA is broken out. Is that because it's bigger, because it's different, or is that part of one of those other columns, or?
That's a good question. So based on how the EDA is set up, we call it it's a component unit. And if they have there's certain criteria that if it's blended in with the city or it's discretely presented. In your case, it's discretely presented because of how the board is and how it's made up and how the decision-making criteria. So in your case, it's not part of the primary government. It's still related, so we still show it. So it's not included in the other two.
Okay, so it's its own entity.
Yep, it's its own.
Got it.
Yep,
Okay.
that's a good question. And the other statement I'll point to quickly is on page, because this will give you the most detail that's in the financial statements on page 106. So this is the general fund budget to actual statement. It's summarized in the front as budget to actual too, but this is where if you want to see, when we talked about the expenditures were $200,000 over what you budgeted, this is where you'd come and look and see which department or which revenue source was over or under budget, but this is where I definitely would look if you have concerns on specific areas that you had questions. So, I think that's all I'll go through on that, unless I have specific questions.
I've got one. We've been talking concerning the water and sewer. And according to this, we're close. And it seems like every year we want to cut back a little bit for people. But when the audit comes out, it kind of says don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both funds, I think you're at that place right now where your rates are just meeting your disbursements in that debt. So definitely I wouldn't recommend cutting back. Okay. I think you do a rate study that's updated or every other year.
Or 3 years.
3 years. And I don't know if is that coming up this year? Or is
Coming up at the end of
coming
this
up this year. So I definitely recommend going through that process again, seeing where those funds are going to be projected out over the next 5 years or however many years you do with that projection. But like you said, the audit's not showing that those rates should be cut back at all.
Okay.
Yeah, and Morris asked that because one of our goals as a council this year and next year is to try and lower those things. Now, there are ways we can
Right.
do it.
Sure.
We just, when you take away from one, you gotta put it on
Figure out
something
where you
else,
take
but,
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
so people understand that.
Yep.
Okay.
Anything else?
Anything?
I'm good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
All
Brad.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if we could have a motion by the city council to accept the financial statements for 2018, that would be appreciated,
Okay.
if you so desire.
Yeah, I'll take a motion to accept and approve the 2018 annual financial report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mary Jill, second by Morris. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, that leads us to council agenda. Council agenda items may be adopted under one motion as presented, or may be removed for discussion and resolution as council business. For you in the audience and at home, I'll go through the council consent agenda. Item A, just and correct claims for the accounting period ending April 30th, 2019. Item B, the minute meetings for the April 16th, 2019 City Council meeting. Item C, approve a time extension for preliminary plot on the O'Gorman addition. D, approve a time extension of the joint powers agreement with the Minnesota DNR. Item E, disposal of miscellaneous public works equipment. Item F, Resolution 2423, accepting a grant of $500 for the Farmers Market Food Aggression Program. Item G, approve the hiring of Daniel Johnson for the Maintenance 2 position for Public Works. Item H, Resolution 2424, accepting a donation of $150 from Cy McClure to the Police Department. Resolution 2425, accepting a donation of $652.39 from Jim and Mary Bassett to the library. And item J, approve the data practice policies. Is there anything that you'd like to pull down? Nothing? I take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bill and a second by Derek to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Council business proclamation for National Police Week 2019. Joburg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. As you know, starting next Sunday is May 12th, which is the start of National Police Week. Our department has been fortunate not to have lost an officer in the line of duty. However, we have had an officer that worked for our agency that moved on in his career that was killed in the line of duty from a drunk driver. This is something that as a department we hope we never have to deal with, but it is important to understand that any day that can change because of the dangers officers face. In 2018, there were 163 officers killed in the line of duty, of which 52 were killed due to gunfire. There were an additional 28 canine officers that died while on duty. 2018 was up 28 officers from 2017, where 135 officers were killed. The average age of these officers was 42 years old. The average tour of duty was 13 years and 3 months. In Minnesota for 2018, there were 2 Minnesota deaths in the line of duty: Corrections Officer Joseph Michael Parise and Corrections Officer Joseph Brian Gom. Both died after assaults from inmates. So far in 2019, there have been 39 deaths, of which 17 of those were from gunfire. Unfortunately, one death was a Minnesota conservation officer, Eugene Wynn Jr., who died when he was thrown from his boat and drowned while investigating a report of a person in the water. Also, a Duluth police canine, Haas, was killed when he was shot by a suspect. Every year since the Minnesota Law Enforcement Memorial was first erected at the International Airport in 1977, officers from around the state have stood guard duty around the monument. Officers stand 1 hour of the vigil while Lima Honor Guard officers walk the thin blue line. This guard is changed every 20 minutes with a precision rifle inspection by the Sergeant of Guard. Minnesota Law Enforcement Memorial is located at the Capitol grounds in St. Paul at 12th and Wabasha. Beginning at 7 p.m. on May 14th and ending at 7 p.m. on May 15th, officers will be standing guard of the memorial in respect of those fallen officers from Minnesota. If you want to know more about the Minnesota Law Enforcement Memorial and Minnesota Law Enforcement Memorial Association, LIMA, you can check their website at mnlima.org. LIMA is supported by donations from public and businesses. There is even a license plate that you can get to show your support of law enforcement, with the additional part of the cost going to support LIMA. Thank you for allowing me to take this time. Mayor, I'll allow you to read the proclamation.
The City of Cannon Falls Proclamation for National Police Week 2019. Whereas there are approximately 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in the communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the City of Cannon Falls Police Department. Whereas nearly 50,000 assaults against law enforcement officers are reported each year, resulting in approximately 14,000 injuries. Whereas since the first recorded death in 1786, more than 23,710 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and been killed or died in the line of duty. Whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. Whereas 371 new names of fallen heroes are being added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial this spring, including 158 officers killed in 2018 and 213 officers killed in previous years. Whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's 31st Annual Candlelight Vigil on the evening of May 13th, 2019. Whereas the Candlelight Vigil on May 13th, 2019 is part of National Police Week, which takes place this year, May 12th through the 18th, 2019. Whereas May 15th, 2019 was designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all fallen officers and their families, and U.S. flags to be flown at half-mast. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Cannon Falls City Council formally designates May 12th through the 18th, 2019 as Police Week in Cannon Falls, and publicly salutes the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation.
On behalf of our department, Mayor, we thank you.
Do I need a motion to adopt that, or it's just a proclamation?
We have adopted other proclamations in the past, so I think
Yep, I'll take a motion to adopt that proclamation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bill and second by Mary Jill to adopt the proclamation. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, that brings us to reports. Mike?
I just want to thank the community on behalf of the fire department. We had our pancake feed last week, and it was, I think, kind of a record turnout for us for a fundraising event. Actually, I'll get all the numbers tonight at our fire meeting here at 7:30, but we're looking to probably have done 30% more than we've ever done at a street dance. So we think it was a good success. Huge turnout, great great response from the families, everybody that came through on the way we ran the event, and it was very family style, and that seemed to be a big hit. So I would imagine tonight we'll probably move forward with doing that again for sure. So that was good. And on public works side, you can kind of see we've been making our way around town, trying to finish up storm cleanup. We've got a couple things in some parks we're still working on. A few more stumps we got to grind out. I think we filled about 120 holes around on the boulevard so far, getting those patched up. And finally, yesterday they opened up our asphalt plant in Empire, so we're able to start doing some pothole filling. So we started over on the north side of town today, and that'll kind of continue. Looks like the weather might be kind of bad the next couple days, but as the weather's cooperating over the next week or two, we'll be making our way around town, getting some of our potholes filled up. So that's kind of what's going on there.
Thank you. Joe?
So last week we had coffee cups and conversation at the bakery, and we had a pretty good turnout for that. Some of the feedback we've gotten back from that is, why don't you guys do this in the afternoon so that people that work can come to it? Well, they're in luck, because we're going to be at Funfest on Thursday. We're going to be setting up a booth, so it's from 5 to 8, and come on down. A lot more time to ask us questions, and a pretty relaxed setting. So tomorrow morning we have Triad at 10 a.m., which is at the CCC, and we'll be talking insurance with Laura Freeberg. So everybody's welcome to come to that. And then, like I said, Thursday will be Funfest. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Linnell? Dave?
Just one item. Blaze Holden has accepted an invitation to come and address the council at next council meeting in May, so we'll be pleased to have him here, and we could have a conversation with him about some of the issues that we've been experiencing in the industrial park. That's all I have.
Steve?
The Cable Commission met on May 1st. Mike, if you want to come out here and update us, otherwise I'll try to get through it here. We went through the surplus equipment we have that I think we're going to be discussing about disposing of it one way or the other. He talked about a little bit about staffing and some ideas for future programming. Also, he discussed getting some quotes or some bids on redoing the lighting in the studio to bring it up to better standards. I think all the updates have been made, so there's still money available to update the lighting too. So, anything else I'm missing, Monty, on that?
I think we're good.
Other than that, that's all I have.
Okay, Matt?
Our first park board meeting went very well. We talked about some goals that we'd like to set for the year, some things that we'd like to do to try to get more park usage, try to make it more visible, possibly hold events, possibly go some Saturday mornings and just walk through the parks, tidy them up. We also have to take a look at Archie Swenson Field, the concession stand that's down there. Before our meeting on the 16th, we'll talk about that, if it needs to be destroyed. Public Works reported that it's pretty dilapidated, fallen apart, and probably should just be torn down. Other than that, today, spent the day at the Department of Health and Minnesota Bike Alliance, I think it is, at the CCC. It was a great event. I think having the trail here in town, it's an asset to the community, and they took it even further. I was expecting our ride to be, let's check out the trail and just talk about how good it was. They really showed how bike-friendly communities, how much more stuff you can do to make it that. The safe rides to school, using the streets, and how much safer that it can be, and some of the myths of accidents and if they're caused by the cyclists or the motorists. And it was a great meeting. It was very informative. Had a great time.
Thank you. Bill?
I have nothing tonight.
Okay, Derek?
Nothing tonight.
Mary Jo?
Nothing from me.
Morris? I just want to bring up a few things. As Dave mentioned, Blaze Holden will be here next week from Sustain. Now, I've got a lot of calls about Sustain, so for you in the audience, it might be your chance to come and see what he's kind of done to correct the problem. So he'll be at the next meeting. Also at the next meeting will be Jim Crusoe from the Census Bureau. He's going to give a short presentation on they call it count every person, and as far as the census goes, but we did receive literature from them this week, and then we'll put it out at the city hall, the library, and the school. They're looking for volunteers, but there are also paid positions involved here too. And Jim will explain this at the next meeting. He'll give a short presentation on that. Again, I was at the bike meeting today with Matt and Dave and Mike, and yeah, I thought it was an excellent meeting. It was a 6-hour seminar, but we learned a lot. So upgrade our trails and streets around town to accommodate bikers. It was a very good meeting. Other than that, Personnel Committee, was that just the maintenance two position?
Maybe I can just update on the shared position.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the Personnel Committee did meet, and they had several items on the agenda. They'll be meeting again to carry over a couple of the items that they didn't make a recommendation yet to the council. But with regards to the shared position, SAM, as I like to refer to it as, we have reached an agreement with Goodhue County to continue to have SAM available to us on a limited period for the balance of this year. Starting in July through December, SAM will be available for 15 to 20 hours a month. We will be paying the county at cost $30 an hour for her services, but that'll be of great assistance to myself and staff in that she can continue to do her fine work with the Planning Commission and take care of the agenda items that come before them. So pleased to report that we've reached an agreement with the county, and we discussed that with the Personnel Committee. Waiting for some paperwork to finish it up, but it looks like we'll be having Sam back with us, at least at the Planning Commission level. So appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that brings us to public input. Citizens may speak to issues not on the agenda. Before speaking, please give your name and address for the record, and kindly limit your comments to 3 minutes. Public comments must be respectful, pertinent to city business, and adhere to the Apical data privacy rules. The City Council will not take action on any issue raised by the public, but may choose to schedule consideration of the item on a future agenda. Kyle.
Good evening, Council and community. I'm here to talk about our first Chamber Funfest of the year. It is Thursday evening, as Joe mentioned, Thursday evening from 5 to 8. It will be on Mill Street between 4th Street and Hoffman Bridge. And we do have just over 30 vendors, so it's going to be a smaller one, but there's going to be a lot of new faces and new products. So that'll be the fun thing to come in and see what's happening. We are having Dan Schwann, the accordion man, playing, so that should be a lot of fun. And we do have 2 food vendors, Dudley's Pizza and the Crumbled Beef Man from Pine Island. And so those are the 2 options this time. I also want to put out there that the flower baskets should be coming a third week before, or the third week of May before Memorial Day for sure. They are bigger this year, only because the pot that we purchased is called a weekender. And what that means is there's a 1-gallon reservoir at the bottom of each pot, and there's wicks that come up into the dirt. And that will draw the moisture up into the plant so they don't have to be watered every day. So that'll help Public Works some too. We are still looking for donations, and so if anyone would like to send in a donation or sponsorship for flower baskets, please send it to the Chamber of Commerce. And if you have any questions, you can give me a call there too. Any questions?
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I tried to get on the agenda here. I talked to Dave, and he recommended that I come here. I've got some concerns about the charter and the ordinances, and you have all been kind of aware of some irregularities, let's say. One of which would be this 3-minute business. because it's very clear. It says the order of business shall be established by resolution. You have not adopted a resolution to do that. I don't know why it's so hard to get on the agenda and talk about our city charter and the rules, order of business. It shouldn't be that hard. Dave claims that the city attorney says that what you did is just fine. Well, I can read it. It's right here in English. It also says the city attorney must be present at all council meetings. I don't see him. I haven't seen him once in years, one time. So I don't know why I should follow your unapproved rules when you folks don't follow your charter and your ordinances. It doesn't make sense to me. So I would like to talk about that further at a council meeting, get on the agenda and do that. And why don't we iron out the snafu? That's proper English. I don't have a big education. I watched that Smarter Than a Fifth Grader. I must have about a second or third grade education because I don't get that. So hidden in your agenda, in the consent agenda, was this business about data practices. I was in here 2.5 weeks ago, inquired to Linnell about where this document was that's supposed to be front and center at City Hall for anybody to get a copy of. She claimed a couple days later that she couldn't find it, and all of a sudden I see this buried and nobody's asked a question. Well, I had my wife pull this up on the computer because I'm not smart enough to run the computer. I'm probably smart enough, but I'm not doing it anyway. So it says clearly here, these are required under state statute, and it names 2 statutes. So the question is, why haven't any of you inquired about, like, how long has the city been in violation of these state statutes? Who's responsible that this wasn't available when it's supposed to be by law? I don't understand this. And I know nobody wants to answer me, but I know the answers. How long has it been? Near as I can tell, it's been about 15 years. Or at least Linnell claims that it went back to Kathleen Miller's era, and that's about 15 years ago. Now, it seems odd that we can't just get together, maybe get this attorney, find out which part of the English language he doesn't understand. Or maybe it's me, but it's right here, it's very clear, simple and it's plain. And why don't we follow the rules? You're insisting that I do. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else, public input? Second call, public input. Final call, public input. Hearing no more, I'd approve a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bill and a second by Derek to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.